Hi, and welcome to the Virgin River Cafe Rewatch podcast. Good morning, Gigi.
Good morning, Tracy. What's shaking?
Well, here we are. We're at episode 10,
Mm-hmm.
the finale of season 3.
Mm-hmm.
What's your caffeinated beverage to help you get through it? Because this one is
Oh,
a ride. Woo,
yeah.
sister.
Well, I have some strong ginger tea, which is gonna kick my throat and kick it into gear. So we'll see.
Okay, good,
Uh,
good.
I'm I'm very excited.
Today I am having something that I made at home. My special blend of flavor that I make. It's sort of like a
Mm,
cinnamon dolce iced coffee and a little bit of
okay.
yummy cream with it. And yeah, something I made at home. I didn't feel like going out this morning. So it's
All
cold.
right.
I know it's cold for
Yeah, I,
us.
it's cool for us.
Cold for us.
When we say 41, I know people in the middle of the country are going, "Oh, that's spring weather."
Right. No, not for us. Sorry. I was underneath 3 blankets and shivering. But that's me. That's just me. It's
That's you
okay.
and it's you and me, my friend.
Yep. It's fine.
I have island blood. Take my word for it.
Yeah.
It drops below 60 and I am not happy.
I know, me neither. I used to love summer and love the heat. Now I'm so over it. I
Yeah.
think I hit a certain age and I'm like, I don't want to be hot anymore. At least when you're cold, you can put blankets on or wear a sweater. But when you're hot, you're just hot. I'm not about that. All right, well, let's get started.
We are season 3, episode 10, people. Woo woo. A wedding, no funeral, and a baby. Oh, that says it
Ooh,
all, people.
that's a lot. Okay. So Jack makes a momentous decision as Mel grapples with how to share surprising news. Doc is plagued with concern, and Preacher meets with Paige's friend. Okay, this one's a doozy.
Put on your seatbelts, folks.
Okay, so here we are now. When we left our friends in Virgin River, Doc had just gotten the knock on the door, the middle of the night knock on the door from a police officer that no one wants because never brings good news.
No, it does
Never in
not.
any TV show, movie, or scripted
In real
writing.
life, even in real
In
life,
real life, a cop at the door in the middle of the night is never good news. And of
never
course,
good.
on par, he's telling Doc that there was an accident. And
Mhm.
obviously, it was Hope. And now we're dealing with it. Now, very, very seldomly
Yep.
do the writers tell you time has
Mm-hmm.
passed. I mean,
Yep.
it's usually like maybe someone will talk about it, like when Jack got shot and it was the picnic, and they're like, oh, it's been 3 weeks since or the other day, but very,
Yep.
very seldomly it'll be written on the screen. And here we have 10 days later, dot, dot, dot,
Mm-hmm.
which
Yeah.
they do it again a little bit later. They do it 2 days later kind of thing, but it's very rare. It's usually like an assumption that time has gone by, but funny how, and for good reason, it's very specific. So here we are,
And I get that. I
10
get
days
that.
later. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
they have to. I mean, there's a reason for it. So they want us to be very clear. I think because the timeline is it's so bizarre compared to other shows. I mean, it's
Yep.
so slow that it's like they need to tell us that they're moving forward because otherwise we're going to think it's the next morning. And
Yes.
they need to know that this has been going on for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
10 days later, we are at the hospital, and Doc is coming out of what looks like an ICU room,
Mm-hmm.
and Jack and Mel are there, and they're like asking how Doc is, and he's like, telling him that they're not leaving him there by himself. And he's like,
Right.
I'm fine. It's okay. They're waiting to hear from the doctor, and Mel and Jack aren't going to leave Doc until they find out what the doctor says. And he's just wondering, like, what I think they were supposed to hear from the doctor, but he's like, I don't know what's taking so long. The CT results should have been back hours ago. And
Mm-hmm.
Mel's just trying to be reassuring that, she's going to pull through okay. Now, keep in mind, if this is ICU and we're not actually talking to Hope, that means that she is most likely not conscious. So that means that she's been in this state for the past 10 days.
Right.
Now, keeping with, she's actually not there filming, but they've kept her center stage in the storyline as they bring her slowly back. By next season, she'll be back, but they need to bring her back without bringing her back. So it's a very clever way that they literally had to rewrite the season in order to make it happen.
Exactly.
So Jack is like, we're gonna stay positive, and then the doctor walks up. It's like, Dr. Mullins. He's like, okay, did you get the test result? And she's like, yes, but it's not good news. She said, in addition to the initial, she had a basically a bleed in her brain. Now she has a cerebral edema from her TBI, which in medical talk, I think Mel is going to explain it. And the doctor's like, this is cause for concern because of potential herniation. And Mel and Doc are shaking their heads, like in understanding that, yeah, they get it. And Jack is like, hello, can someone translate? And Mel's like, the impact from the crash caused Hope's brain to bleed and swell. And now there's new swelling. And they're worried because that could shift some of the brain tissue, and that could be fatal. And Doc is like, and I'm assuming that you're going to take her into surgery. The doctor's like, yes, she's about ready to be prepped for it. And he's like, okay, so what are the treatment options in order to control the swelling after the surgery? And the doctor gives them two choices. They put her basically in a medical-induced coma, or they can increase her steroids. And Doc is like, no, she has a heart condition, because remember her heart attack last year.
Right, exactly.
And if they increase the steroids, it could cause another heart attack. So they really only have one way to go, and that's just to put her in basically a medically induced coma and hope that her body can rest enough to calm down and hopefully start to get better. And Jack is curious because he doesn't understand why these decisions are made, because he's not a medical person. And he's like, well, what is the thinking behind that? And the doctor is like, well, she's been in and out of consciousness. And when, if you decrease the brain activity, because in and out of consciousness means she's awake, she's asleep, she's awake. And that's a lot going on in your brain. And they need to calm her down, put her to sleep so that the swelling can be reduced. And that can help the brain heal faster. So that's basically what they're discussing. And Jack's got it now. He understands. And the doctor's like, look, the risks involved, including impaired consciousness. And Mel's like, so she could remain unresponsive even after they take her off the sedation and wake her up? And the doctor's like, correct. So they don't really have another option. This is the best option, but it may not have a good outcome.
It's the lesser of two evils. Let's just put it that way.
Right. And it may not have a good outcome, but they don't really have another choice. Yeah. So, and the doctor's like, I'm sorry the news isn't better, but we need to make a decision right away, because they don't want to wait. So Doc is like, if you think inducing, doing this is the right thing, then I trust your judgment. And she's like, good. She's like, a member of our, admin team will come by and we'll do the paperwork. We'll get everything signed. And they're all just kind of standing around looking at each other. And they're like, Doc, Jack's like, Doc, I'm sorry. And he's like, Hope is strong and she's going to get through this. And I think he just appreciates, the support of having them there. And so they were going to head to the cafeteria. They asked him if he wanted anything. And he's like, no, I'm good. Just a lot of sighs, and he's like, I'm just worried. He goes, I've made so many mistakes when it comes to Hope. And he's like, I just pray that this isn't another one. But I mean, he didn't really have a choice. He couldn't have chosen anything else.
Well, those were the options he was given. It's not like he had like 6 day choices to make, and he gave him 2.
Yeah, and one wasn't even good. So now we have some scenery, which we love. Waterfall. God, I love this place. I would move there if I could. I really would. It just seems like it would just be so serene, right?
Yep.
I'd move into Mel's cabin. I'd be thrilled.
Oh,
so
don't even get me started with that place.
Right? So Mel has a message on her phone from Grace Valley Hospital. And it's
Mm-hmm.
1:46 in the afternoon, and it says, "Dear Miss Monroe, this email is in response to your most recent test at Grace Valley Hospital. The following are your results." And as it scrolls down, there's a lot of like jargon, like certain things are, numbers and HCG. For anybody who doesn't know, HCG is a pregnancy hormone. 34, kind of high. And at the very bottom, it says your results suggest in bold italicized letters, positive pregnancy test. Your first test result is considered a baseline level.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Now she did have IVF, and she did have makeup sex when she got back, like that next night. So she's standing in the bathroom. On the sink is the phone, and she's staring at it, like in disbelief.
Yep.
Like she's sitting and in walks Jack. He's got some coffee. "Hey, babe." She's like, "Hey," like, "Oh shit," like, like what else is she gonna say? Like, this was not news she was expecting.
Not at this time.
Well, this woman does not think she can get pregnant. She's basically told everyone she's barren, like there's nothing going on in there. And clearly thinking that she could not get pregnant. Guaranteed they're not trying to prevent anything. So what happens. And he's like, "I got you a latte." And she's like, "Okay." And she's like rubbing her temples, and she's like, "Oh my gosh." And she's like, "I'll be right there." But very tentative, like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Now she's possibly thinking, okay, Mark or Jack? Like, could it be?
Okay. So let me ask. I'm going to be devil's advocate here to some degree. I know they had makeup sex, but she went to LA to get inseminated
The day before.
The day before. So
it could have been the day before.
If we go back in time, she and Jack had sex
a lot.
morning.
But yeah, but it doesn't matter because she was there for a few days with. I mean, I guess it's possible she could have been pregnant before, but not. And the reason I know where you're going with this, they do a pregnancy test before. I know because I've been through it. They do a pregnancy test, and they run a lot of tests before you do IVF. Now, she could have been pregnant, but it may not have shown up yet. And when you do IVF, they're testing you at a very specific time. And it's generally 8 to 10 days later. And the blood test is much more accurate than the peeing on a stick test, which now, I'm talking 20 years ago, they weren't as accurate. Now, you could be 5 minutes pregnant and pee on a stick and it shows up. That's now. Back then, it was not as accurate. So yes, it's very possible she got pregnant before she went and it didn't show up yet. It's very possible that it was that night. It's almost like she's got 2 chances with Jack and 1 chance with Mark. I mean, if you want to look at it that way, it increased her chances that the baby could be Jack's as opposed to Mark's.
Yeah. Okay.
But I mean, IVF isn't perfect. I went through a bunch of them that didn't work. So it's a crapshoot. In her mind, it's just a big question. She had been sitting on a stool staring at her phone, and she kind of stands up and taking a deep breath and walks out there, and she's like, "Oh, hi, and how's Hope?" And he's like, "Oh, surgery was a success, and she's stable." And she's like, "Okay, that's good." And she goes, "I'm going to get dressed, and then we can go to the hospital." And you could tell she's off. She is definitely, like, very distracted. And Jack is like, no, Doc said not to come. And she's like, "But he shouldn't be alone right now." And he goes, "Yep, that's what I told him. But, Mel's like, "Yeah, but he's so stubborn." And so she starts to make the bed. Now, remember when she gets stressed, she likes to change the sheets and stuff. But so she just makes the bed. And he was like, "Oh, yeah, let me help you with that." And she's like, "Yeah, but we've been there for what, like 10 days in a row?" He's like, "Yeah, well, maybe he just wants some time to himself." And, she's like, yeah, I guess you're probably right. And so she's putting pillows on the bed, and he's looking. He knows. He's looking at her like, I know
What's
my
up?
woman. Something is not right. And she's taking deep breaths, and and he's just like, he's like, so, the last few weeks have been pretty tough. She's like, yeah. And she's looking through her clothes, trying to find something to wear. And he's like, how about we get dinner tonight at the pier? And she's like, oh, sure, yeah. She goes, but I was kind of thinking maybe we could just be alone tonight. Because she wants to tell him, but it's going to take her a minute to, like, build up the courage to,
Yeah.
like, share this news.
Yep.
And he's like, well, I mean, we will be. She goes, no, I mean, like, without other people around. And he's
Yeah.
like, okay. And he knows, he's looking at her like something is wrong. He goes, okay, how about
Yeah.
a compromise? We'll walk around the pier and then we'll get takeout. And she's just like staring into space, totally distracted. And he's like, and then we'll come back here and we'll have dinner, just the two of us. And she's like, okay. Yeah, that sounds nice. Let's do that. He knows something's not right. And he's like, are you okay? And she's like, yeah, I'm fine.
No, you're not.
Yeah. And she walks right up to him, puts his hands on his shoulders, and she's like, you know how much I love you, right? And he's like, I do, because I love you too. A little kissy kiss. But it's like she needed a little reassurance, Because she's like, oh my God, how am I going to tell him what I did? Because they were broken up. And she went and
Yeah.
did that. And in an interview or something, I read that she's like, why would Mel do that? Seriously, why would she do that? I would not have done that. Why would she do that? I mean, I guess if you think that it's over, but I mean, it had been over for like 5 minutes.
Exactly.
Like, she wasn't even sure 100%.
And I blame her sister for that.
Yes, I know. We do love Joey, but this time Joey was a bad influence.
Yeah. I love Joey, but
Sorry, Joey. We're mad at you.
Yeah, I am not thrilled with Joey right now.
But, I mean, they say everything happens for a reason, and
I know, but Joey put that little worm in her
Ah.
head. And that
you don't
just-
need a man. You can have a baby without a man. And yeah, true. But
It's the fun part.
yeah, I mean, but it's like Joey knew what she really wanted, which
Yeah.
was to be with. She even told her that. Like, I'm heartbroken. I can't even think about starting another relationship with somebody else in order to try again.
Mm-hmm.
And when Joey suggested that, it was like, oh, Joey. Like, she's so vulnerable and hurt and heartbroken. It's like she was vulnerable to suggestions, and it's like she was on such a track that she wants to have a baby
Yeah.
that she just did it. I don't
Yeah.
know. Alex Breckenridge was like, Mel, really? I mean, Jack wouldn't have broken up with her. Mel wouldn't have gotten the IVF. I mean, come on. But, the writer's right, and we complain. That's just how it goes.
Mhm.
So Doc is back at the hospital. He's, just watching through the glass, and Lizzie shows up. Kind of unexpected, but I mean, Lizzie was working for Hope for a long time, so maybe she felt like she needed to check in. And so he was like, hey, and she's like, the guy at the front desk was so lame. She's like, I forgot my driver's license, so he wasn't going to let me in. And he's like, well, then how did you get through? She goes, I started crying. She's like, I can cry on command. It's pretty useful. So her and Doc sit down, and they're just kind of, she's just kind of like a friend to hang out with. And she's like, how's Hope? And he's like, well, she's hanging in there, She's like, good. She goes, I'm so sorry this is happening to you guys. And he's like, yeah, thank you. Me too. And she's like, I brought you wireless earbuds. And he's like, oh, that's so nice of you. She's like, can I see your phone? And he's like, yeah. I mean, this is like helping Grandpa with his phone.
Yeah, helping hook him up.
She's like, the password is 222. She's like, that is not very secure. He goes, yeah, but it's something I can remember. And she's like, whenever I'm feeling stressed or sad, I like to listen to music. And he's like, so I made you a playlist. Once I import it, you can find it on your iTunes. He goes, do I have iTunes? She's like, yeah, it's right here. She shows them. She goes, I picked mostly stuff from like the 60s and the 70s because I didn't know. And he's like, what kind of music? And he's like, classic. So she's like, I didn't exactly know. So I went with obvious choices. Bob Dylan, Joni Mitchell, the Stones. He goes, oh, yeah, I like all three. And she's like, what is your Apple ID? And he's like, she's like, never mind. I'll just use mine. It's fine. It's going to take a little while to download, so we'll just use mine for now. And so she gives him the earbuds. Now he obviously is not too familiar with those. And he puts one in his ear and he puts the other one in. And they're playing a song, Drift Away. And Doc is nodding and sighing. And Lizzie's like, do you like it? And he's like, yeah. I like it very much. And he gets very teary. And he kind of starts to cry. It's so sad. And he takes the one earbud out and hands it to Lizzie. And he's like, this is so thoughtful of you, Lizzie. Thank you. With tears in his eyes. And she's like, you're welcome. With tears in her eyes. He was being at the hospital sucks. He goes, yeah, it does. It sucks. And the music continues. And he's like, would you like to listen with me? And she's like, sure. And she puts an earbud in. And they just kind of sit there together, listening to some music. It's very sweet of her. Lizzie's come a long, long way.
Oh, yes, she has. She definitely has.
It's funny. I feel like between Connie and Hope, they have given her such a dose of reality and purpose.
Yeah. Given her a purpose. Because when you go through life not knowing, nobody gives you anything that you have to work for, and your parents pawn you off on nannies and housekeepers.
Yeah,
you don't feel like you have anything,
well,
and that's why
she had no connections.
Right.
Life is about connections, and she didn't have any.
Yeah, and so she got a job, and Connie made her answer for the things that she felt that were inappropriate.
Yep. And then she got a better job because she worked with Hope. Right. And then she met Ricky, which is a completely different person compared to the guys that she was dating.
Right.
So
none of that worked.
She got a whole new look at a different reality that she was used to. And it sunk in.
Yep, it did. Because she learned responsibility.
And I feel like she just grew up a lot. She finally had some, I don't know, her own self-determination as opposed to just flying through life doing whatever she wanted to do. So now we're back at Jack's bar, and Preacher's arriving. Hannah, one of the servers, who I love. She is so funny. She is great.
Oh, hysterical.
I think this is maybe her first scene, because remember they were looking for somebody? And she's like, hey, Preacher. And he's like, so how is your first shift? She goes, well, I broke a stack of dishes and tried to serve meatloaf to a vegan. She's funny. I love Hannah. I think she's hilarious. So she says, lucky for you, we don't have a lot of vegans around here. She goes, good, because now you're short on dishes. Now, when she breaks things, I don't know. Nobody seems to mind. But when Brady did it, oh, my God, it was like the end of the world.
Well, the difference is she wants to be there.
I know. And she's actually trying. Brady couldn't have cared less.
Exactly. Brady didn't want to be there, and he could give a rat's ass. Yeah. Excuse me, friend.
No, it's right. It's
true. And I think that's what bothered Preacher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Preacher's like, you know what? Don't worry about it. You're doing a great job. And she goes, you don't have to be so nice. I can take constructive criticism. He goes, well, how about don't break any more dishes? She goes, well, now you're just being hurtful. Now, funny, interesting thing I found out. They do table reads before, like when they're practicing. And they kind of run through the lines. Sometimes they change dialogue. Sometimes they adjust things, before the episodes. And not all of the characters are present for a table read. Usually it's the main ones, but not every character. And they have extra people that they use them as extras, I believe, too. But their job is to sit in on the table reads and kind kind of be the other characters that aren't present during that. And
Right.
that the person who plays Hannah, she was a table read person. And they
Ah,
liked her so much, they created a character.
well, that's nice.
And she is now, I think she's been on the show since then and she's sprinkled throughout. It's not like she's a main person, but when they're at the, there's a lot of scenes with her and Preacher and her and Jack. And I think as time went on, she did get more and more scenes, but she's just so funny.
She is.
I love her. I think she's hilarious. Okay. So Jack is in his office and he is staring at a very beautiful ring in a very little box.
Mm-hmm.
Wonder what
And it
that
looks
is.
exactly, and it looks like an old ring, like it belonged to someone before.
It does. It does look like something a bit older.
Yeah, I don't know if it's his grandmother's ring or was his mother's ring. I don't know.
I don't know, and maybe we'll find out. Now, it looks like there's this old tin right in front of him, and maybe that's where he was hiding it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, looks like Preacher was heading back to the office.
Mm-hmm.
So, Preacher knocks on the door, and he's like, "Hey," and Jack kind of puts it away real
Mm-hmm.
quick, kind of hides it. And he goes, "Hey, didn't mean to interrupt, but I wanted to know how Hope is doing today." And Jack's like, "Well, right now it's kind of a wait and see situation." And he's like, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, how's Doc doing?" And he's like, "Yeah, he's taking it pretty hard. And just tell him that I'm praying for him." And he's like, "Yeah, Doc will appreciate that." And then he calls back to Preacher. He goes, "Hey, wait a second. I know things have been a little upside down since the funeral, but I was wondering if you'd given the partnership any more thought." And Preacher comes in and he's like, "Well, I wanted to talk to you about that." He kind of sits down on the arm of the couch. And Jack's like, "Okay, what do you think?" And
Tension.
Preacher gives him a big smile and he's like, "I'm in." And they do a nice big manly handshake. And he goes, "Oh man, that's fantastic." He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "This is going to be good. I'll get the paperwork drawn up." And he's like, "Don't worry about it. We'll take care of it. And I'm so glad you followed through." And he goes, "No." He goes, "We're practically family." He goes, "Yeah, that's for sure. And if you ever need anything," and he looks at he kind of glances down on the desk and sees the little box. Like,
Mm-hmm.
"If you ever need anything," and Jack picks up the box and he kind of looks at him. He goes, "I might need a best man." And Preacher's got his smile is so big. He's like,
Right.
he goes, "Yeah, that's great." He goes, "You two, you're good together." And Jack's like, "Thanks." He goes, "So, what got you thinking about marriage?" He goes, "I don't know. Seeing Doc torn up at the idea of losing hope." He's like, "That's how I feel about Mel. I don't want to live without her." And he's like, "Well, then don't." He goes, "I don't know. I never thought I'd be getting married again. I mean, just the fact of I'm thinking about it is kind of freaking me out." He goes, "Yeah, but you were a kid the first time. Kids make mistakes and you know who you are now and you know what makes you happy." And
Amen.
he's like, "That's true." He goes, "Thanks. I appreciate it." So Preacher's like, "Anytime." And he goes, "Hey, don't overthink it." So Preacher gets to be the first one to
Yep.
know.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my. Okay, so now we see Mel, and she is walking in a restaurant,
Mm-hmm.
and she's with Bree.
Yeah.
Now, Bree must have called Mel because
Yeah.
now that they're back together, and, Mel and Jack are back together, and I mean, Mel and Bree were becoming close friends anyway, but
Mm-hmm.
like we said before, there's not a lot of women their age
Yeah.
in
And
town.
also, exactly. And also, a side note is that there are not a lot of women their age on set either.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's why now they have become besties in real
Well, in
life.
real life, it's funny you say that because they said they clicked almost immediately,
Right, exactly.
and that
And
could have been. I mean, there's Charmaine, but
yeah, but I think the thing about it is she had about the same amount of time with Charmaine than she does with
yes, but they didn't connect for whatever
they didn't.
reason. Their
Yeah,
their friendship. I mean, I'm sure that they it's like a big family, the set and the
right.
cast and everything. They're all friends. They're all like family, But
Right.
these two connected
They
on a
click.
different level,
Yeah.
and they got close pretty quick.
Well, yeah. It's you don't, when you get that sister bond thing going
Yeah,
on,
yeah,
that that's a rare occasion.
it
That's a
is.
very rare thing, I would say.
So Bree is waiting for Mel, and she's like, "Thanks for meeting me here." It's one of these cute little cafes, probably in Grace Valley. And she's like, "Of
I was not
course."
about
Yeah.
to say that.
She's like, "Of course. How are you feeling?" And she's like, "I'm okay." She's like, "Good." She goes, "Did you get a chance to contact that therapist that I recommended?" And Bree is like, "No, therapy's not really." She goes, "I know therapy's not really your thing, but if you could just give her a call and see what you think about her over the phone." And
The
she's like,
Saradins have an aversion to therapy,
"Oh yeah, they want to
as,
handle all their business by themselves."
as we'll find out later.
Yes, always, all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And Bree wanted to tell Mel, she's like, "I've decided to leave town." And Mel's like, "Oh, Jack didn't mention anything to me." And she's like, "He doesn't know." She goes, "I was actually hoping maybe you could tell him for me." And
Why would you do that?
Mel's like, "Why you want to leave town without telling Jack?" Like, she's like, "He's going to ask a bunch of questions, and after everything that's happened, she's like, I really can't handle being cross-examined."
Yeah, so he's gonna have to track you down and cross-examine you
Cuz
there.
he's not going to let that go.
Oh, I know that, because the fact that she thinks she can run away from Jack of all people.
I
I
know.
mean,
Oh my
the
god.
man's gonna track her down by her parents, and he's gonna get an answer.
Yeah. Yeah. Now
I don't know.
Mel's like, Mel's not going to let this go
Yeah.
because Mel has been in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
So Bree's like, "I'm so embarrassed."
Mm-hmm.
She goes, "Mixing wine with Xanax, passing out," and she's like, "It's not something I'm proud of." And Mel's like, "Look, no one's judging you, really." And she's like, "No, I'm judging myself." She goes, "You haven't known me for very long, right? But this is not me. I am someone who is used to being in control." And Mel's like, "You know what? Nobody can be in control all the time." And Bree says something that resonates with Mel to her core. She's like, "I just want to go someplace new and start over." She could not have this conversation with like
Anybody else?
anybody else who would not understand this better than the person she's sitting across the table from.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, "Someplace where no one knows me." And Mel's like, "Well, pain just doesn't disappear. It follows you wherever you go until you deal with it."
Amen, sister. Amen.
And Bree's like, "Something happened back in Sacramento." And she's like, "Something that," and she like takes a deep breath. And you can tell she's getting upset. And she's like, "Bree, you don't have to tell me if you don't want to." And she's like, "I want to." She goes, "But you swear not to tell Jack." She's like, "I'm serious." She goes, "Because I don't want him to know about this." She's like, "I swear, I would never." And she's like, she kind of looks around. You can tell she's about ready to cry. She goes, "Ugh." She goes, "This is harder than I thought." And Mel's like, "Just take your time." And she's like, 6 months ago, I started dating that attorney I told you about. We met at a fundraiser, and he was smart and handsome, and our chemistry was insane. And then she's like, almost in tears. She goes, "And one night we were together, and I was tired from working all day, so I told him no. But he didn't stop."
Oh boy.
And she can barely get it out. Her voice is shaking. She's crying. She goes, "And when he was done, I started crying. And you know what he did? He got dressed and walked out without saying anything."
Well, rapists do that. They don't stick around to
Yep.
find out how you're doing afterwards.
And Mel's like, "Oh, sweetheart." And then Bree starts crying. And she's like, "My miscarriage is from that night." And she puts her hands in her head on the table. And Mel gets right out of her seat. She's like, "Honey." And she goes over and she just hugs her. And she's like, "I am so sorry."
And I think that you can tell by the way she's hugging Mel.
Yes.
That's the first time she said it out
Oh,
loud.
yeah. Yeah. And obviously she didn't know she was pregnant. But to have the realization that that's all of that was connected.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And it comes with some form of relief because she's had it bottled up inside of her
Yeah.
since she came to see Jack.
Right.
Because she wouldn't have been there if Jack hadn't gotten shot.
Right.
So,
Absolutely. It's like everything has to happen for a reason.
mhm,
And her going there gave her the break that she needed
mhm,
from her job to kind of give her a little perspective
yeah,
because she really needed it. So,
mhm,
and once, like everybody who's, it seems the broken people find their way to Virgin River and they just get put back together again.
well, it's a good place to get back
So,
together. It's a
so,
place to relax.
so now we're at Jack's bar and Preacher's there coming out
Mhm.
and talking to Sally, he says. And she's like, hey. And she's like, thanks for seeing me. And she's like, is Christopher with you? And he's like, no, he's at camp. And she's like, good. She's like, I don't want him to know I'm here. And she goes, so what's going on? Is Paige okay? And she's looking around. She's like, is there somewhere we can go talk? Somewhere more private? And so they take a walk. And he's like, okay. And they go like around the corner. He's like, so where's Paige? She goes, she's in a cabin near the county line, just past Yeoman's Ridge. He goes, she wants to turn herself in, but she wants to see Christopher first. And Preacher's like, well, we talked about this before she left, that if she goes to prison, he's going to end up in foster care or worse with Wes's family. And she's like, yeah, she goes, that's true, but she's so worn down from being on the run that she won't listen. And Preacher's like, okay, then I need to see her. And I need to remind her of what we talked about. And she was like, you know what? I was really hoping you would say that. Come with me. Now we're on the patio of Jack's bar,
Mhm.
and Jack looks like he's cleaning up, and it's Charmaine. She's like, hey, Jack. And he's like, oh, I didn't know you were planning to come by. She's like, well, I wasn't planning on it. He's like, so did you work things out with Todd? And she's like, well, you could say that. She's like, we actually got married. And he's like, wow, when? She's like, yesterday at City Hall in Eureka. And he's like,
Why
oh,
did and she looks so elated while she
right?
said,
She doesn't look like a very happy bride. I'm sorry.
let me tell you, that is not how a bride is supposed to look. And you can tell Jack is also sensing that as well.
Oh, yeah, he totally sees that. He's like, well, I got to admit, that's not what I thought you were going to say, but
Yeah, both of-
okay.
yeah, exactly.
And he's like, congratulations. Like, kind of like, and she's like, thanks. She goes, yeah, I told him that I wasn't going to move to Eureka unless we had a wedding date set. And he decided that we didn't need to wait. Oh, again, this is Todd making all the decisions. And that was her problem with him. But apparently, somehow or another, she's okay with it. I wonder.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, that's great. Like, is it really great? Or you're just saying that? He goes, well, you must be so happy. She goes, I was. Yeah. Until I found out that you hired a family law attorney. And he's like, who told you that? And she's like, well, Todd was interviewing lawyers to represent me. And the woman.
Okay, so she has a right to find lawyers, but he doesn't have a right to find a lawyer? I don't understand that.
Well, it's who. It's the who.
Who
So,
cares?
well, because she wants to beat Jack, and so she wants the best. And
Oh,
Todd
okay,
wants the best.
Okay, so
That's what it's about.
Okay, because it's fine for him to get a lawyer as long as it's not a lawyer that's going to kick your ass. Exactly.
Well, and it's
Am
not
I-
the best because so what she says is Todd was interviewing people, and the woman that he wanted to hire said she had a conflict of interest.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And she's like, which he assumed was you. And he's like, look, I don't want to fight. I just want equal custody of the twins. And she's like, honestly, Jack, I don't see that happening. And she gets very smug very fast.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, and why not? She's like, because Todd doesn't want you involved with our family.
Oh.
I mean, okay. There's so many things wrong with that sentence.
Tell me about it. Because basically, she's thrown down the gauntlet, and now Jack now has to come charging like a rhino.
Yep. And he's like, oh, and he says exactly what I was thinking when those words came out of her mouth. He goes, oh, I'm sorry. You mean involved with my kids? Jack, she's like, I'm not going to risk my marriage in order to defend you. He's like, Charmaine, we are the twins' biological parents, you and me. Anything concerning them should be between you and me, nobody else. And she's like, look, until I have my own attorney, Todd is representing me. So if you want to talk about custody, your lawyer is going to have to discuss it with him. And she starts to turn around and leave. And he's like, Charmaine, hey, look at me. Look, are you seriously going to let this guy keep me from seeing my own kids?
Mm-hmm.
She's like, he's my husband and he might not be perfect, but he's a good man and he'll be a dependable father. And he goes, those twins are my flesh and blood. How do you think they'll feel when they realize you pushed their father away? And you could tell the concern in her face.
Oh yeah, and the look in her face, because now she realizes she's conflicted. She has a conflict of interest.
It's
now.
like she's trying to have this life with Todd because he'll
Yeah.
give her everything that she wants.
Exactly.
I mean, except for what she really wants, which is a life with Jack.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, stop it. Stop trying to guilt me into taking your side. That's not what he's doing. It's called the reality of the situation, my dear.
Well, but I think the thing about it is she realizes Jack is right.
Oh, yeah.
But she's gotten defensive because she realizes she's wrong.
Oh, yeah.
And Todd is wrong. But she wants to have her cake and eat it.
She's going to have to be wrong and strong in this situation because she doesn't have, because if she doesn't do what he says, he probably won't stick around.
Yeah.
Todd.
I just think she is just being a pain in the ass.
She's selfish. Yeah, she is being selfish, and she's not doing what's in best interest of the children.
No, she's doing what's best interest of Charmaine. And I get it. She was a single mother expecting twins. The man that she's had the twins with is in love with another woman. But
he was willing, even with her by herself, to be a father and to help her and help raise them and help take care of her and them. But that wasn't good enough for her because she either wanted all or nothing. And she said it when she got pissed when she found out that they slept together. I'm going to find myself someone and you're just going to have to deal with it. She forewarned him, and here it is coming true.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then all these other people start walking in while they're having this little argument. And he's like, I'm not trying to do that. He's like, I'm not trying to guilt you. We're talking about our children's future. And she's like, I have to go. Like, she can't even deal with the reality that what she's saying is completely wrong.
Because she knows she's wrong. She knows she's wrong.
Yep.
It's not like she doesn't. But the thing about it is, because she knows the jerk she's married to, she knows that Todd is not going to accept the fact that Jack is in their lives.
Oh, no.
And so he's trying to justify it with a poor excuse for what she's doing there, and she knows it's wrong.
Well, he already is trying to, moving them farther away just to make it difficult, thinking that eventually Jack will just lose interest in his children. Like, he clearly does not know Jack very well.
No, he thinks. Well, the problem is this: he sees Jack as a low
class,
exactly,
just a bartender, just a Marine.
Right. And doesn't realize that Jack comes from a very established family.
And he's a good caliber person.
Right. And so he's judging him by appearance. He doesn't know Jack from squat.
And plus Charmaine has probably been bad talking him this whole time. Exactly. And so he's just like on the bandwagon there too.
Right. So he has an assumption of Jack. And what did they say about assumption?
Yep. Makes an ass of you and me. Mm-hmm.
All right. So he's making an assumption about Jack, and he is sticking to it. And now he's rubbing that assumption all over Charmaine like baby oil. And she is absorbing all this crap as well. And so it's now she in her mind's eye, Jack is not a suitable person to raise their children. And this is where we butt heads. Anyway.
Unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
Unbelievable.
Yep.
So we are with Preacher and this friend who is going to help Preacher talk to Paige. And they stop for some drinks and snacks.
Which I find odd.
Well, it might be a long drive. I think it's a long drive. I think it's a few hours.
Okay.
So she ran in to go grab some snacks. And he was like, oh, maybe they got thirsty because he was like, oh, she goes, oh, I should have gotten you a large. He goes, no, that hits the spot. Sure I can't pay you for it? She's like, it's just a soda. It's fine. She's like, plus, I'm really grateful for your help. And he goes, you know I'd do anything for Paige. And she's like, me too. And off they go. Now we're at the lumber yard.
Oh, boy. Never good news when we're at that place.
I know. That place is,
Never good news.
It looks like, I think it was Brady was having a conversation with someone. And all of a sudden, this Jeep, which is Brady's, gets surrounded by much, much larger trucks. And he can't go forward or backward. He's got cars in front and behind.
And
and
who comes out of that big truck?
Yep.
Calvin
gets out and he's like, Brady. And Brady's like, what the hell was that? Going for a drive, he says. And Calvin's like, celebrating? And he's like leaning on the car, like very smug. He's got a very smug cat that ate the canary look on his face. And he's like, haven't you heard? It's official. All the charges against me were thrown out. And Brady's looking around like dumbfounded. He goes, they didn't have any evidence. No one willing to testify. Not even Spencer. He goes, well, good for you. And he goes to get back in his truck. And he goes, I hear Emerald Lumber's got you drowning in debt.
Oh, Lord.
And that's when Brady kind of stops and turns back to him. And he goes, I'd cover expenses for 6 months. Payroll, equipment, transport, all of it. That'd get you back in the black. And he's like, yeah? And what's in it for you? And he's like, I got my own debts to deal with. So if you're open to diversification, he goes, no, no, I am not running drugs for you. And he goes, I'm not asking you to do anything except look the other way. And he goes, sorry, not interested. He goes, Brady, my suppliers are going to get their money back one way or another. And Brady kind of stops with his door open, kind of like, he's kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. Because remember, he's drowning. He's looking for, remember he was talking to Bree. He was trying to get a loan, because there's problem with the trees. And Calvin's like, and if I can't give it to them, well, they're coming after you.
Poor Brady. He can't get a break, can he?
He goes, can't do that from prison.
Yeah.
And Brady's like, what are you talking about? And Calvin's like, word is your alibi fell apart. Now Brady slams his door and he starts walking back to Calvin. And he goes, are you talking about Jack? I got nothing to do with it. And Calvin's like, no, then I guess you got nothing to worry about. He's so smug. I like the guy as an actor. I like him.
I was now thinking he makes a great bad guy.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got the look.
He's got the swagger.
Yeah, he's just got the look that basically says, this is a guy you do not want to F with. You know what I mean?
And he just looks at you and it's like that look your mom gives you when you're in trouble. He has that look, Like you get nervous just him looking your way the wrong way. And he always does it with a smile and a southern accent. It's like killing him with kindness.
Yes.
So Calvin gets back in his car and he backs up and the other guys get back in their cars and they back up and they go away. It's like a little warning. So now we're at the bakery truck. Lizzie's working and Ricky shows up and he's like, hey. And she's like, you've been ghosting me. And she's like, yeah, well, I've been busy. And he's like, look, I know I messed up. I should have told you that I wanted to enlist. I'm really sorry. She's like, yeah, I don't want an apology. It's like, you seemed really upset at Lily's house. That was at the funeral when she was crying on Connie's shoulder. She's like, yeah, I was. The reason I didn't tell you is because I was afraid you'd talk me out of enlisting. And she goes, and why would I do that? He goes, because you want to get married and have babies. And she's like, did I ever say that? He goes, we took a quiz on how many kids we were going to have. And you want to move in together. And she's like, the quiz was a joke. And moving in together doesn't mean we're going to get married. This isn't the 1950s. And Ricky's like, so what if I had told you? What would you have said? And she's like, I don't know. Maybe I would have been upset, but then I would have told you to go. And do you know why? She's like, because I loved you. And I wouldn't have supported whatever you wanted to do. Loved, he says, like past tense. And as she's looking over Ricky's shoulder, you see Parker walking up. Yeah.
Mhm.
And he turns around and he goes, Lizzie, I know I screwed up, but she just stares him down. And he's like, Parker's like, hey, babe. And Lizzie's like, look, I don't need an apology.
Mhm.
You live your life and I'll live mine. And she kind of motions to Parker to come in to the bakery truck.
And Parker's like, what did I just walk into?
Yeah, not going to say a word, just going to keep your
Nope.
head down and keep walking. Don't make eye contact.
Yeah, yeah. Parker is not quite sure what he walked into, but he's not going to be part of it.
No, no. So a little bit of scenery, and now we're back at Brady's cabin. Now Bree's waiting for him. She's
Mhm.
parked in front, and she's kind of like leaning on the back of her car on her phone. You see
Mhm.
Brady's motorcycle, and a vehicle approaches, which is going to be Brady's Jeep. She's got a little smile, like she's happy to see him, and he's got a little smile, like he's happy to see her. And he's like, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And she's like, "I thought you might want to hang out." And he's like, "Yeah, I do." And she grabs his hand, and they walk inside.
Oh boy,
The two of them.
she's holding on to so much there, man.
Yeah, but they got a lot of chemistry, so.
They do, they do.
So Paige's friend and preacher have now arrived at a destination. Kind of looks like in the
Mhm.
woods. Seems like they've probably been driving for a bit. And she starts walking like into the woods. And she's like, the cabin's just down this hill, okay? And he's looking
Mhm.
around and he's starting to like shake his head like something's not right. And he gets a little wobbly and he's like, what's going on? And he's getting very like wobbly, like he can't even walk straight. And he's like, I feel a little dizzy. He's down on his knees, and then he goes
And did
down.
oh, she drugged his drink.
Yep. So she grabs his phone as he's watching her walk away, as he's like dazed and confused. She grabbed his phone and she runs back to the car.
Mm-mm-mm.
Oh, yeah. So now we're back at Brady's, and he's just put in a movie, The Sting.
Yes, that's a good movie.
Yeah. And
I
remember,
think
Bree's
I
never
think
seen it.
seen it. Yes, right. I remember him telling her that she had to see it
Yes.
because she had seen it before.
And she's like, you sure you don't have Legally Blonde? And he's like, oh, come on, you're going to love it. Because Legally Blonde is her favorite movie.
Oh, you know.
And he just kind of sits. I mean, she looks uncomfortable. Like they're sitting on the couch like they're at a doctor's appointment, ready to go see the doctor. Like she's got her jacket folded in her lap and, you know.
Like she's ready to go depending on how bad it is.
Right? Like, yeah, like she's going to make her escape. If she wants to, she's ready to make the escape. And he's like, hey, come here. And he puts his hands on her shoulder. He goes, man, you're all knotted up, like massaging her shoulders. She's like, oh, that feels good. And he's like, well, as long as you're here, I'll do whatever you want. And she kind of like makes him stop doing that to her shoulders. And she's like, yeah, about that. And he's like, what? She goes, that's why I came over. She goes, I'm thinking about leaving Virgin River. And he's like, what? You got to go back to work? And she's like, no, it's not that. He goes, then what is it? She's like, I've been dealing with some stuff and it's too hard with Jack here. And he's like, oh, I see. He pauses the movie and he's like, what about us? And she's like, us? He goes, yeah. Like, I meant what I said. I'm falling in love with you. You're all I think about. She's like, oh, I'm sure that's not true. He goes, I wouldn't say it if it wasn't. She says, this doesn't make sense. You know that, right? I mean, they're from different worlds. I mean, she's an attorney and he's, I don't know what he is exactly. He doesn't, we don't know. Ex-Marine, current, like, what is he? He's just a guy.
Yeah.
She goes, my brother thinks you shot him. He goes, but I didn't. He's like, look, the truth is, I can't get enough of you. All I know is when we're together, there's this heat that I've never felt before. It's called chemistry, honey. Do you know what I mean? She's like, yeah, I do. He goes, then stay just a little while longer. Give this a chance. She's kind of groaning. She's like, if I say yes, I feel like I'm going to regret it.
Got a lot of baggage that woman's walking around with.
Yeah. He's like, you won't. Promise. And then he gives her a smile. And he nods his head like, come on. So, Brady, he's very persuasive. You know, I mean,
the men in this movie are in this show are very persuasive.
So a lot of times they just look at you with their eyes. All these women are just like, they melt when they see them
Mm-hmm.
being all sweet and caring. And
Yeah.
So we're back at Tara's house.
A lot of swagger.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So Lily's farm, that's where Tara is. And Mel and Jack show up, and she's like, thanks for coming. Come on in. And they bring her some dishes, and it's like, oh, is this scalloped potatoes with sausage? And from Preacher, he knows it's your favorite, and an apple pie. And she's like, oh my gosh, it's so sweet of you. Thanks. She goes, I have such crazy news. And Mel's like, what? She goes, an anonymous donor set up a trust for me and Chloe.
Oh.
And Jack is like, wow, that's incredible. And Tara's like, yeah, I know. The trust will cover help and maintenance for the farm so we don't have to move. And Mel's like, oh, Tara, that's just amazing news. I'm so happy for you. As Jack is like, light bulb, look at Mel.
Oh, exactly. Yep. He's
like,
there.
And she's like, thanks. I just wish I knew who it was so I could thank them properly. And she's like, yeah. And she's like, your mom touched a lot of people. And Tara's like, she did. And she's like, I have something for you. Wait right here. And she leaves the room. And Mel's like, okay. And then Jack gets this like look on his face.
Exactly.
And he turns his head and he goes, gee, I wonder who the benefactor could be. And he looks at Mel. And she's like, well, I mean, obviously somebody that wants to remain anonymous. And he's like, uh-huh, your secret's safe with me. She's like, how do you know it was me? And he's like, oh, come on. Who else would be so generous and refuse to take any credit? And he grabs her and he's holding her close. And she's like, oh, she goes, I just don't want Tara to feel indebted to me. That's all.
That was very nice.
Yeah. And he's like, okay. And then he looks over her shoulder, like looking behind her, like looking down, like at her back. I love this scene. It's adorable. And she's like, what? And he goes, oh, I'm just looking for your wings. And she chuckles. He goes, you sure you're not a guardian angel disguised as a human being? And she's laughing. And this scene right here where they both turn and look at Tara, that's one of the screen captures that photo is used a lot in like promotional stuff.
It's a great photo because they both have dimples. It looks like a genuine moment there. You know what I mean?
It's a great smile. They're both looking at the same direction.
Exactly.
So Tara comes back and she's like, Mel. And she has this painting, this beautiful, looks like an oil painting in this really ornate frame. Looks very old. She goes, Mom wanted you to have this. She goes, my father painted it. And Mel is like just flabbergasted by it. Like to the point that she puts her hand on her heart like, oh my gosh, Tara, this is beautiful, but I can't accept that. That's a family heirloom. And she's like, no. She wanted you to have it. She said if you ever leave, she wanted you to have a piece of Virgin River. She goes, and if you don't take it, she'll haunt both of us. And they all get a chuckle out of that. And she's like, okay, thank you. It's very cute. I love that scene. So beautiful scenery shot, some waterfall. So Brady and Bree, they're still at his place. He goes and makes some popcorn. He brings popcorn and she's like, extra salt. And he puts his arm around her and she's like, you are so freaking gorgeous. You know that? And she goes, sounds familiar. Then there's banging at the door and he's like, what the hell? And they both look nervous. She puts the popcorn down and he goes to get up. And he goes, what's going on? He goes, I don't know. More banging on the door. Brady's like, hold on. Now, Bree is looking a little nervous.
I'd be too if somebody's banging on my door.
Jesus.
It's one thing to knock on my door.
Yeah, but it's banging. And Brady's like, what the hell is this? And it's Mike. Now, Bree is standing back, so they don't know she's there yet when this conversation happens.
Yeah.
And the sheriff comes in and he's like, we're here to execute a search warrant on the premises. And he shows them the search warrant. And Bree steps forward. And Brady's like, you got to be kidding me. And Bree's like, may I see it? Because she's a lawyer, of course. And they hand it to her, and she looks it over. And Bree says to Brady when she hands it to him, says, "You don't have a choice." And he looks at
Well,
her and he's like,
yeah.
okay, fine. But
First of all, I don't think Mike would ever come to anybody's house without proper paper.
of
Let's
course,
just
he's a very
because
by the book kind of guy.
I was now about to say that he is by the book kind of guy. So
And Brady's like, you got to do what you got to do. And the sheriff's like, all right, let's get to work. And the guys, bunch of people start walking in, all sheriff. And the last one to come in is Mike. And he's like, he says to Bree, if you want to stick around, it's your call. But if you want my opinion, you're wasting your time. You deserve a whole lot better.
Whew.
I know. Isn't that like, oh, that's
Whoa.
ouch. Right to his.
That's like a slap in the face, girlfriend.
And then Brady says, why don't you do what you got to do and get out?
Wow. That's low, man.
I know.
Low. That's really low.
So they're just kind of standing there watching the people look through their place. Oh, my. More scenery, but this time it's at night. We very rarely see scenery at night, like overlooking the city and all of that. So now we're back at the cabin with Mel and Jack, and she's hanging her purse up and taking her shoes off, and he's holding the painting that Tara gave her, and he's like, "Alrighty, so where do you think?" He's looking for a wall. He goes, "How about over here?" And he walks over on the other side of the bed next to the window, and she's like, "Yeah, that looks good." He goes, "You want me to throw some steaks on the grill?" And she's like, no thanks, I'm okay. And she sits on the bed, and he's like, "Come on, you hardly ate anything for breakfast." And she's like, "I know, I think I'm gonna lay down." She just looks exhausted. And he's like, "Okay." And he puts the painting down. Like, now he's a little worried, because this is not usually how Mel is. And she just kind of curls up on the bed with the pillow and just kind of lays down. He's like, "Are you okay?" She's like, No, I'm fine. I think I just need some sleep." We know why. And he sits down on the bed. Oh, and because remember, they were gonna go out. Remember that morning, they had made plans. They were gonna walk to the pier. They were gonna get takeout and come back and have dinner together. But it wound up being a very busy day, and probably too much for her now in her current state. And she's like, "Honey, I'm sorry about tonight." And he's just rubbing her side, and she's like, "I know you tried to make it special." And he's like, "That's okay." He goes, "Maybe we could get up early and we could watch the sunrise." It was a nice suggestion he made. He's like, and he goes, "If you're feeling better." And she's like, "That sounds nice." She goes, "Why don't you just wake me up when you get up?" And he's like, "Okay." And he's sweet, and he covers her up with a blanket.
She's out for the night.
Right? Oh, yeah. He's like, "I love you." And he gives her a little kiss.
He is out for the night.
And she's like, "I love you too." And she's done. Like, she's out. And he was probably going to propose, because he reaches in his pocket. I know. He reaches in his pocket, and he puts it in his jacket pocket. And he's just going to have to find another moment.
He's going to have to find,
So now we're at Lizzie's, and up in her room, and Parker's there on his phone, and she's got 2 glasses of orange juice, and she's like, "Sorry, there's no alcohol in the house." And he's like, "Well, there is now," and he has a flask. And she goes, "Parker, if Connie catches you, we're in so much trouble." She's like, "Chill, you're so uptight. You need to get out of here."
That was the problem. This is what got her into trouble to begin with.
Exactly.
This kind of mentality with these kind of kids.
Yep. And she's like, "I told you, I don't want to go back to LA. And he's like, "Why not?" She goes, "It's too expensive to get my own place, and I don't want to live with my parents." So he's like, "Well, I don't want to go back either. What about the club?" She's like, "Ugh." He's like, "I'm not about that anymore." She's like, "Uh-huh." Boy, he changes his mind a lot. Like, he's going to open up a club. It's not something you do very easily, but whatever.
When you have money and options.
Money to burn, yeah.
Exactly. You can do whatever you want.
And he's like, "I'm being serious." He's like, "I'm going to road trip across country." She's like, "With who?" She goes, "If it's Dave, don't let him drive, because he's baked like 99% of the time." At least she's giving him good advice. And then he gets up on the bed with her, and he's like, "The only person I want to go with is you."
Oh, please.
And she's like, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "It'd be like an adventure, just the 2 of us going wherever we want, whenever we want. You want to see the Grand Canyon? Done. You want to go to Miami? We're there." She's like, "Parker."
Again, a kid with a kid with unlimited funds.
And nothing to do, like no direction, no sense of anything.
Yep.
She's like, Parker, we're not getting back together. And he's like, why not? She's like, because I don't trust you. He's like, okay, I know I screwed up. Shouldn't have hooked up with Olivia.
Mm-hmm.
So now you regret sleeping with her? He's like, of course I do. It was stupid and immature. He's like, I was just frustrated that you. And she's like, don't blame me. That's weak. He goes, I know. I'm sorry. He's like, for real. I love you.
Oh, Lord.
Please give me another chance. She's like, I just can't pick up and leave. He's why? What's keeping you here? And she just looks at him.
Mm-hmm.
So now we are at the B&B and we see a young gentleman with a backpack and an umbrella heading to the door. This is our introduction to Denny.
Mm-hmm.
It's raining outside and he walks in. It's such a old-fashioned country feel to the B&B.
Yeah.
So he walks in the lobby and Joellen says, oh, good evening. How can I help you? And he goes, hi, I'd like a room.
Okay, so when he does his finished introduction, I'm gonna have a bone to pick with us what he does.
Okay.
But go ahead. Mm-hmm.
She's like, okay, I need some identification. He goes, I'm 19. He goes, still need proper ID. And so he pulls his ID out and hands it to her. Oh, you're from Seattle. He goes, I have a friend who used to live there. I hear it's a beautiful city. He goes, yeah, it's okay. He goes, so what brings you to town if you don't mind me asking? He's like, oh, I'm looking for my grandfather. He goes, oh, well, I know almost everyone in town. What's his name? Dr. Vernon Mullins? And the look on Joellen's face as if she's seen a ghost. Because she's been there a long time. And she knows that Doc doesn't have any kids.
Okay, so here's my bone of contention. He comes to town. He knows that his grandfather does not know about him.
Yeah.
Why would you say that to someone who you don't even know?
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, I agree.
Because now you've told someone she knows everybody in town.
Yeah.
And she's the first person to know before you talk to him.
Yeah.
Instead of saying,
no, I agree. That was wrong.
You know, that was I'm sorry. That was
He should have just played it cool, played it calm.
Exactly. Just say I'm visiting and I'm
That's
here
it. Leave it at that. I'm visiting.
Exactly. Right. And then if you can look it up, because the fact that he's gotten that far and he knows that he lives in that town, it's not like it's not going to be that hard to find him.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
It's a very small town of 600 people. It's not going to be hard to find the person you're looking for.
Exactly.
Now, interestingly enough, in the books, Denny is a character.
Right.
He is actually looking for his father, but he thinks that his father is Jack. In the books. And he keeps it very quiet. He actually winds up working at the bar for a minute and befriending Jack and learning what kind of a person he is. And then he springs it on him. They find out that the woman who's his mother was a friend of Jack's, but not someone he was involved with. And that the guy who was his, like, I don't know, his mom's boyfriend was actually his father, who was not a good person. And he really hoped that Jack was his father because his stepfather or whatever was not a good person. But they wound up remaining friends, and Jack had already taken him under his wing before he even found out that he could possibly be his son. And so, I mean, it was like I always say, people say, oh, the books are so different from the show. It's like the show is inspired by. They pull the characters. They tend to tweak them and change them. I mean, even Brady in the books is like a 50-something-year-old man who's got a prosthetic leg, who was in the Army in the Marines with Jack and the guys, but a totally different character.
Right.
So, kind of interesting, but yes, this is our introduction. So we've met two new characters in this episode. We've got Hannah from the Jack's bar, and now we've met Denny. So the look on Joellen's face is like shock, which is hilarious.
Of all people
I know. Oh my gosh.
The queen of gossip.
Well, she'll say it later. One of the lines she says when a secret comes out that she couldn't hold. She's like, you know me, I'm like a sieve. I can't hold a secret for anything. She will be saying that in the future, but we already know that to be true.
Yeah.
So we're back at the hospital, and Doc is there, and he went to go get some coffee. And when he comes back, he sees Muriel waiting by the chairs that are right outside of where Hope's room is. And she's like, "Hi," and he's like, "Oh gosh, hi. How long have you been here?" She's like, "Just a few minutes. I figured you'd have come back at some point." He's like, "Yeah, I went to the cafeteria," and she goes, "Oh, if I'd have known, I'd have brought you back a cup of coffee." And she's like, "Oh, don't worry about it. I'm fine." She's like, "It's you I'm worried about. How are you?" And he's like, good." And she kind of tilts her head, looks at him like, "Yeah, you're not fine." He's like, "I'm not good. I'm surviving." And she holds his arm. And she's like, "Well, I've got a little something here for Hope that just might cheer you up." And she pulls this big blanket out of her bag, holds it up. And it's one of those blankets that you can get and print people's pictures on it. And I would have expected like a quilt like that the ladies made, but I mean,
Exactly. Yeah.
they've had 10 days. So maybe they didn't have time. But it's got pictures of everybody. Lily and Connie and Muriel and Jack and Mel and Doc and the Doc and Hope right in the big picture in the center, and Preacher's at the bottom, and Liddy's at the top, and so almost every. I'm sure there's more at the bottom that we can't see, but everybody's on there.
We have the main characters.
Yeah, there's Christopher and Tara, and she's like, so that when Hope wakes up, she'll see everyone who loves her. And he just smiles, and he was like, "Wow, I don't know what to say. That's marvelous. Thank you." And then the doctor comes out to talk to Doc. And he's like, "Is everything okay?" And she's like, "Look, she's developed a fever." And he's like, "Oh no, an infection." She goes, "Don't worry. I've ordered a chest CT, and, we're going to do some tests, and I'm going to let you know as soon as we know something." And he just looks really worried. So he's running his fingers through his hair, and he just sits down, puts his hands in his head, his head in his hands. Muriel's just sitting with him, putting her hand on his back, and she's like, "Everything's going to be okay." And he starts crying. He goes, "I no longer believe that that's true."
Oh.
He goes, "I should have called her when I found out about Lily, and she should have come home. She wouldn't have been on the road when that damn truck crossed." And she's like, "Vernon," and he starts crying. And she's like, "Come on now, you can't think like that." And he goes, "I know, but it feels like she's slipping away." And he's really crying. He goes, "And there's not a goddamn thing I can do about it." And Muriel's just being there as a support system. Because she can't, I mean, she secretly loves him, but she cares about him as a friend just as much. I mean, she is genuine. Yeah, in the beginning, she was being all conniving and whatever, but they are genuine friends. They do really care about each other.
I don't blame that only on her.
I know. That's Hope's problem, too. I know.
That's Hope started that little shina ding ding.
Yeah, I know.
So,
I agree.
Because we know she's a flirt anyway. So you give her a chance. As they say, you give a kid an inch to take a mile, or you give Mary, she takes a mile.
Yep, exactly.
So you don't open up that kind of worms with Marianne and a man, especially a good looking man.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we're back at Preacher's house, and Christopher just got home with Connie. He's carrying a pizza, and he's like, "When's Preach coming home?" And she's like, "I thought he'd be home by now." And he comes in and he puts the pizza on the thing, and he's like, "What? You mean this whole pizza's just for us?" He goes, "Well, we should probably save him some." So he puts the pizza down on the table and he opens it up and he goes to probably grab it. And then the camera pans into the other room, and who in the dark is sitting there on the couch? Vince. The twin brother of Paige's husband. And he gets up and he starts walking into the kitchen. Now, at the same time, we continue with the search. It's now the evening. It's now dark out. And they've been searching Brady's house. And somebody makes a comment to him. And he's like, "Screw you." And they're like, "You done?" And he's like, "Well, when we are, we'll let you know." And he goes, "Well, you're wasting your time." And one of the men is like, "Sheriff?" And they look inside his car, and the guy pulls out a gun.
Of course they do.
And the sheriff calls Mike over. He's like, "Venezuela?" And he comes over and he's like, found it wedged underneath his seat. And Brady's like, come on, you planted that. That's not mine. I swear to God it's not. Is that a Glock 26, same caliber used on Jack? He goes, that's not my gun. That is not my gun. And Bree is looking like she's shocked.
Yeah.
And he turns to Bree and he's like, Bree, you gotta believe me. I'm being set up. And Mike gets right in his face and he's like, read him his rights. Now, remember, these guys were in the Marines together. They served a couple tours together.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure.
But there is bad blood.
Oh, yeah,
here.
there's definitely bad blood.
There's bad blood here. I'm sorry.
And Brady's pleading with Mike. He's like, Mike, I'm being set up. And he's like, Mike, you son of a bitch, come on. So they push him up against his Jeep and they handcuff him. And they're like, Daniel Brady. And he's like, Bree. And he's like, you're under arrest for the attempted murder of Jack Sheridan. And he's like, Bree, I'm innocent. And she's looking at him and she's like, don't. He goes, you have the right to, they say, you have the right to remain silent. And he's like, Bree. And he's like yelling at them to get off of him. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. And he's like, Bree, I didn't shoot Jack. And it's, of course, a very sad song in the background. So here we are in the morning with an amazing sunrise. And I wonder if this was a backdrop or if this was an actual sunrise, because it's really hard to tell. They have some, what they do, it's a screen. It's like to uncomplicate the explanation. It's like as if they were to print a photo on a sheet and string it across like a movie screen. And a lot of times the scenery is that. It's just a projection of some kind. So I don't know. It looks real because of where they're sitting, but I guess they could fake the rocks and the grass and what have you and make it look like they're outside in a beautiful sunrise. Or it could be a real sunrise. I mean, location shots are difficult and weather and sound and everything. And if you've got to do a certain scene in a certain amount of time and you got to redo it, you can't count on the sun to stop while you retake, you know?
Exactly.
Anyway, it's a beautiful sunrise. And the two of them are just sitting there, Mel and Jack, nice and serene and looking at each other and holding hands. And he's like, are you okay? Are you warm enough? And she's like, yeah, thanks for bringing a blanket. And then I love how they just look into each other's eyes. She's like, the view is just so beautiful. It is. It's one of the most beautiful scenery scenes that they've had.
Yes, it's true.
And Jack's like, I was here on leave looking out at that. And I just knew I was home.
Well, when you find your place, you find your place.
And as he's looking at the sunrise, she's looking at him. And she's like, I love you, Jack. And he looks at her with his dimples. And he's like, I remember the day I realized I was falling in love with you. He goes, actually, no. It wasn't the day. It was the exact moment. And she looks at him like, really? And he's like, yeah. He goes, we were on a picnic with Chloe. You were contemplating whether to be her guardian, even though you didn't want to stay in Virgin River. And she's like, oh my gosh, you didn't even know me then. He goes, it didn't matter. It was a feeling. And he goes, it's like I'd been missing something my whole life and suddenly I wasn't. And she just kind of shakes her head back and forth. And she's like, I had been so numb for so long, I couldn't feel anything at that point. And he's like, I know. They just look at each other. He goes, but you were brave enough to open up to me. And for that, I am forever grateful. And then they give a little kiss. In the sunrise.
Yes.
Very sweet.
Very, very cute.
And then he's like, there's something that, and he takes a big, deep breath, that I've been wanting to ask you. And he digs in his pocket, and he's positioning himself like on his knee. And she's like, oh my gosh. And he's like, I want to get this exactly right. And she's like, wait, Jack. And he kneels down, and he's got it in his hand. And she's like, no, give me a second. I have to tell you something. And she looks up at him and she's like, I'm pregnant. And like in disbelief, he's like, you're pregnant? She's like, I wanted to tell you yesterday, but with Doc and everything. And he sits right back down, puts it back in his pocket. And he's like, no. Hey, this is good. And Mel groans. She's like, oh, he's like, this is good. I told you I was all in and I meant it.
Oh boy.
He goes, this isn't exactly how I thought it would go, but, he kind of gives a little chuckle. And she's like, oh, honey. And he's like rubbing her face and they're putting their foreheads together.
Yeah.
And he's like, I can't believe this. This is amazing news. She's like, no, it's not.
Mhm.
And he's
God.
like, hey, come on. What? Like, obviously, something is bothering her. He goes, whatever
Mhm.
it is, we'll get through it. And she shakes her head, no.
And the look on her face is like she's devastated because she has to tell him what.
It's like she's just made him the happiest man in the world
Mhm.
because he was going to propose and now he's going to be a father. And now she has to pull the rug out from under him.
Uh-huh.
And she's like, Jack, I don't know if you're the father.
Ay, vay.
And it's like he's frozen. Frozen. The end. Season 3 has now come to a close.
Now, just so you know, and I'm going to say it again, imagine waiting a whole year
I
for
know.
this next scene.
Thank God I didn't have to. Man,
Let me tell you, the
the
agony,
agony, the
the agony I
torment.
went through. Oh my God, I can't even tell you the agony I went through after seeing that.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
cannot. I mean, the first season, it's like,
yeah.
really? Like, last season was he gets shot, and we had to make sure he lived. Now, you might not be the father?
Yeah.
Like, what?
Yes.
Because he just froze. Like, there wasn't a reaction. It was like gut punch.
Exactly. Because first of all, he finds out she's pregnant and he thinks, oh, everything's great. It's his, everything. And then she hits him with a sucker punch. It might not be
Can you
yours.
imagine in that moment what's going through his mind? First of all, you told me you couldn't get pregnant. Now you're pregnant. Okay. That's a miracle. We're just going to chalk that up to good things happen to good people. Okay? We're going to leave that one alone. We're going to put a pin in that. Put that aside for the moment. We'll deal with that part of it later. Secondly, how do you get pregnant and it might not be mine? Like, we were together before you left. We've been together probably more than once after you got back. What happened in between? Now, granted, his first thought is, oh, you have, some fertilized eggs in LA that are just sitting there waiting to take up residency in your uterus. Of course, that's the first thought. No, he's not thinking of that.
Because he doesn't know that she has fertilized eggs.
No, I think
No,
I
they
think
never that.
I don't. I can't. I honestly can't remember, and I know they're going to talk about it, but
I don't recall. But when it comes to this show, my memory can be a bit vague. But I don't ever recall her ever mentioning
because
she had.
there is, and he knows deep down and for a fact she would not have cheated on him. There's no way she would have done that. So it's more of immaculate conception. Like, I don't understand how this can happen. If it's not Jack's, then whose? And then it will make sense once they have that conversation, but then it's tormenting. And it's just to hit him with that. Like, he wanted to propose and he's a father, maybe. And then the rug pulled out. It's like, oh, you ruined the moment, sister. But she had to tell him. She waited an entire day, which that's pretty quick. I mean, some people hold that news for a long time because they don't know how to, but she's not one to hold anything back. She is very direct. So I'm really glad that she didn't wait because I think things could have turned out worse if she would have held that to maybe wait till she found out or something.
But you and I both know that this is not who Mel is.
No, she's very direct.
Right. She would never hold that back from Jack.
No.
So a day was killing her.
Well, she was going to tell him that night, but with everything that went on, she couldn't. That was her absolute, literally, it's like 5:00 in the morning. They're watching the sunrise. She didn't have to wait much longer. So yeah, that's a rough end. I mean, this show is known for cliffhanging almost every episode, but their finales for the season are doozies. And this one was chalked up to one of the biggest doozies.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking back to all the finales, and I'm thinking this one.
There've been a lot of big ones.
Yeah, but this one was
I know. This was pretty big.
This one was a bitch. Excuse my French.
No, I hear you. I agree. This was a tough one, and to wait. Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was rough. So
Yes, it
I'm
was.
sure people. I'm sure while they were filming season 4, people were like trying to stalk the anywhere they could to try and find out anything possible. Like seriously, what?
Yeah, all I know is that I was just a pissed off person because I
Yeah,
was like, hey,
really? Like
seriously?
really? Our next episode is going to be the beginning of season 4. Ooh, and like they do, we barely miss a second from one season to the next.
Yeah.
We just roll right into the conversation as it left off, even though a year has passed. That's why this show is so weird on its timeline, because it's been now 6 years, but for them it's been about 14, 15 months. So they need to figure that out, because that's only going to work for so long. The show will be on for 10 years and it'll be 2 in Virgin River time. I'm like, we can't do that. We're going to have to, the people are aging. They need to like catch up a little bit. So we'll see how that works out. But yeah, that's a hell of an ending. Hell of an ending for season 3. Ooh, we got Brady, and he's been arrested for shooting Jack. And Christopher is probably been kidnapped by Vince. Preacher is in some forest, unconscious, on the ground somewhere. Clearly, the friend, and I say that in air quotes, of Paige's
Mm-hmm.
has betrayed him. Let's see. Do we have any other? I think that's all the. Oh, and Denny has come to town looking for Doc. So that's a big episode. That's a lot to end the season on.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
on.
we'll just have to see what happens next.
Uh, well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen,
Yes.
and Virgin River fans, for
We've gotten through
joining
3 seasons.
us through the first 3 seasons. We've got a few more to go, and we're just going to keep going. And we hope you continue to join us and enjoy our little shenanigans as we discuss the comings
Mm-hmm.
and goings of the little town of Virgin River.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gigi.
Thank you, Tracy.
All right.
Au revoir, folks.
All right. Have a great day. Bye bye.